Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Neil Gurley. I will be facilitating this webinar here. Today's presentation is on the topic of protecting your company from material price escalation. You're free to ask your questions during the presentation, but we're going to go through the entire presentation and answer questions at the end. I'm now going to introduce our speaker, Ron Ciotti. Ron is a partner at the Hinckley Allen and Snyder LLP in the greater Boston area. He went to the University of South Florida for his undergrad, double majoring in finance and business economics. He then went on to Washington & Lee to receive his JD in banking, corporate, finance, and securities law. Ron specializes in construction law, representing anyone from general contractors to owners and developers in construction-related matters. Ron has handled every aspect of construction law, such as contractual disputes, lien waivers, and bond claims. He also has broad experience in construction transactional work, drafting and negotiating contract documents for all types of project delivery. While he's a great lawyer, Ron is also a nationally recognized speaker and has presented on a myriad of construction-related topics on behalf of over 50 different organizations, including the AGC of America, Construction Super Conference, Construction Management Association of America, and many others. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Ron Ciotti.
I'm going to jump in for a quick second, Ron. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt.
By all means, Mark.
For those who've attended our webinars before, know that we try to put on great seminars that are educational for everybody. We usually don't ask outside lawyers to come and present, but Ron truly is a nationally recognized speaker in construction law. In fact, he may be the most sought after attorney in construction law for speaking engagements. He's a great speaker. More importantly, Ron and I went to law school together, so I've known him a long time. We've reacquainted ourselves through the Construction Law Forum, also through AGC, and so I can testify not only to the quality of his legal acumen, but also he is a man of upstanding values and morals, and he's also just a heck of a fun guy. So I'm not going to take any more time, but I just wanted to let our listeners and viewers know how highly we think of Ron Ciotti. Thank you, Ron, for coming.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you for the crazily kind words and the over-the-top introduction. I will say this, that those of you who use Mark as your counsel, you've made a tremendous decision. I have known Mark for years. His legal acumen is unchallenged, and the fact of the matter is, he knows construction law as well as anybody, including myself. So I do appreciate those words, Mark, but I share in the admiration. So
thank you.
So Mark has asked me to come today to speak on this issue of material price escalation, which I think most of you know is probably the hottest topic in the construction industry right now. And for those of you who haven't dealt with any material price escalation, then you're living under a rock and probably have nothing to do with the construction legal field or most business fields, frankly, because material price escalation has affected everybody and has been such a volatile issue that I will tell you, I have now done this presentation, I think, for 8 organizations. And upcoming, I'm going to be doing this presentation for the AGC of America at the National Convention in just a few weeks down in Orlando, Florida. I'm also going to be speaking on this for Construction Super Conference. And it's everybody needs to find out how do I protect my company? These material price escalations can clearly really tremendously affect a company. So the next slide is me, in case you don't see me on the video. I got another picture of me in here just in case. It's when my beard was much darker than it is now. Obviously, this is a disclaimer that every lawyer loves to put in their slides, and everybody goes, oh, geez. But anyway, that's what it is. So what is material price escalation? You know, everybody, I do get this. So Ron, you're going to be talking about material price escalation. Well, everything goes up in price. So what's the difference here? I mean, if I bought a widget in 1980, that widget's worth a lot more right now because of the fact that prices go up. They just naturally go up. But clearly, that's not what we're talking about when we talk about material price escalation. When we talk about material price escalation, we are talking about the change in the cost of a price or a specific good over a period of time. But what we're really talking about is price explosions where the price blows up. And for those of you who have been in the industry and not hiding under a rock, you know that this is happening all over the place with steel, with lumber specifically. We watched lumber triple in price over a period of 12 months. So we are really talking about those material prices that just explode over a short period of time. And so what we're going to be discussing today is really what are the causes of these material price escalations. We're going to show a couple of examples of how they affect different materials and products. And then we're going to go through what you need to hear, which is how do I either eliminate or mitigate those risks of material price escalation, and when can they be done? Well, they're going to be, I'm going to show you, they're going to be done in the bid process, during the procurement phases, and really the contracting phases. And then I'll show you some ways you might be able to, if you didn't do anything during those phases, to mitigate or eliminate your risk. Some things you might want to look at in a contract to determine whether you can still get compensated for these material price escalations. But I will tell you, if you haven't done any of those and you're just looking at a standard contract at the end to try to get compensated, you're going to be doing a lot of this, a lot of praying. So let's find out, let's take the prayers out of it right now and see if there's other ways to attack it. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is causes of material price escalation. And why are we talking about causes? Because anytime you want to try to get ahead of a problem, and a material price escalation is a problem, anytime you want to get ahead of that problem, you need to find out and understand what causes those problems. So that when I see that, when I'm watching the news, when I'm reading a newspaper, when I'm reading the web, what is it that I'm looking for to be able to determine whether there's going to be a problem, a material price escalation, a shortage of materials, which may cause the material price escalation. So we need to start looking at that. So I've got some events here that are typical causes of material price escalation. New regulations put on certain goods can certainly cause material price escalations. Taxes can cause material price escalations because of the tax itself. In addition to what taxes end up doing relating to the price based on shortages, et cetera. Tariffs and trade policies can have significant effects on material price escalation. And the reason for that is not just the tariff itself, but again, a lot of times tariffs create more shortages in the production of those goods. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Wars can have an effect. So when you're looking at tonight's news and you see different wars in different areas, even if the US is not involved in any of those wars, the fact of the matter is that as long as there is a war in an area that your materials or products are coming from, or where the products that you're purchasing, the materials within those products are coming from, those wars can hurt the supply chain, can interrupt that supply chain, which is going to have a price impact. So the same thing with disasters and natural disasters, same issue. And so you have to take a look at these. Now, the reason I have or and with the dots there is because in 2019, the Agency of America came to me and asked me, Ron, would you put on a material price escalation presentation at our national conventions? Of course, I said yes, and I did. And I listed all of these items as events for causes of material price escalation. There was one event that I did not list because frankly, I hadn't thought of at the time as a cause of a material price escalation. Anybody guess what that is? I'm guessing you know. Global pandemics. It was not in 2019 thought about as a cause of a material price escalation. Obviously, unfortunately, and I don't like joking about it, but unfortunately, we all know now that COVID-19 and the global pandemic has created significant material price escalations. And for those of you who don't think it has, that you think there's other causes behind those, I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And you're right in some cases and may not be so much in other cases. So how tariffs and trade policies can cause price escalation. I'll give you an example right here, and I think this was an interesting one to watch and be part of. In March of 2018, the Trump administration announced that there was going to be future tariffs on steel and aluminum, 25% on steel, 10% on aluminum. The interesting part of all of this is not that the tariff itself caused an increase in the prices, because the tariff would. They're putting a 25% increase on the price of the steel. That's going to cause a price increase, of course. The interesting part was that before the tariffs were even put into place, there was just the announcement alone led to a 10% increase in steel prices by March of 2018. So right immediately, just on the announcement that there was going to be tariffs put on, the prices increased. And it's because of that unknown. It's because of the unknown, whether the tariffs would be, whether there was an immediate rush to purchase steel at that given price, and supply and demand, steel manufacturers immediately boosted up the price. So again, it's looking to see, when you hear announcements like this, how to take care of it. What do you need to do to get ahead of that material price escalation? And here, almost immediately, we had a 10% increase in the price. 10% might not be much, can be significant, obviously, depending on the amount of steel you're talking about, the size of the project, et cetera. So again, you really need to look at what's going on, how it's being, what's going on in the world, and these tariffs were a great example. Tariff implementation isn't the only thing. Trade agreements, as we talked about, the China trade wars had significant effects on all sorts of things: flooring, lighting, fixtures, et cetera. There was a tremendous amount of actually steel. There was a lot of different things that were affected by the China trade war. We ended favorable treatment with India, where a lot of our products come from, a lot of the materials that we use in building. And when we ended the generalized system of preferences with India, same thing with Turkey. And so again, you need to figure out that, where these are coming from. The U.S. pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which had an effect on various materials and products. And then just recently, the one that we're very familiar with, tariffs were put on Canadian lumber imports, which sent lumber prices skyrocketing. It wasn't the only reason why those prices went skyrocketing, but it's one of the effects. One of the other effects is just what's on the screen right now, which is disasters can cause price escalation. Well, what did we have? Last year, we had wildfires in the West that burned nearly 5 million acres. That was last year. That doesn't even include the millions already of acres that have been burned by this year's wildfires. And so you have a tremendous shortening of availability of lumber. And as a result of that, for all of these reasons that we've been talking about, the tariffs, the fires, you have an availability of lumber that becomes less. Whenever you have an availability that's less, supply and demand, the price goes up. So you need to be ready for this. You need to be watching things like this. Who would have thought? It was interesting to watch in the news the Suez Canal crisis when the ship Ever Given got lodged in the Suez Canal. Was kind of interesting to watch for all of us. Well, if you went beyond the interesting part of it, you started realizing, whoa, this is stopping $9.6 billion worth of trade passing through there. What ends up happening? Again, shortening, interruption of supply chain. Anytime there's an interruption of supply chain, you can bet your bottom dollar that you're going to see volatility in a lot of different products that were in that $9.6 billion of trade that was going through the Suez Canal. So again, even though it's another part of the world, how it affects you can be very significant. You got to be ready for these. So then we get to the pandemic. And so I know a lot of people say, the pandemic didn't affect any type of material prices. Of course it did. And one of the main reasons it did is because back in early 2020, when the pandemic blew up here, especially here in the United States, the fact of the matter, what happened was there was a significant reduction in production. There wasn't the call for it, and a lot of factories ended up saying, whoa, 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 we're going to cut back tremendously because we're actually guessing that there's going to be a significant lack of demand of our product. So we're going to produce much less. Well, when they went to revamp their factories and get them up and running again to 100%, they couldn't, because they couldn't find the labor. And they're still having trouble finding the labor, just as you probably are, because the construction industry is in a real pickle right now with labor problems, trying to find enough labor. So are the factories. And so as a result of that, the production is much less than it was back prior to the pandemic, and it's caused by the pandemic. And again, anytime you have minimizing in the amount of product that's available, you're going to have price increases. Another issue that occurred was, for whatever reason, COVID-19 ripped through dock workers. Don't know the answer to that. You need a Dr. Fauci here to explain that one, not me. But it ripped through dock workers across the country. And as a result of that, it depleted our dock worker ranks. Ships couldn't come in, so the cargo handling was slowed dramatically. I gave you the example of, at one point in time, 37 cargo ships from China, just from China, were anchored off the shore of Southern California's coast, which created a backlog. They couldn't come into the docks. There weren't enough dock workers to do the unloading. And again, anytime there's a supply chain interruption, what does it mean? Material price escalations. So those are all some of the causes that you can be ready for, look at, understand, to be able to get ahead of the material prices. What are some of the examples of material price escalation, or I would say even volatility? Because it's not always escalation that kills you, it's just the volatility, the unpredictability of where the pricing is going to be. And here I'm showing you that volatility can be in anything: hot rolled steel, power wire, gypsum products, asphalt, copper wire. You can see all of the changes in the pricing. But here is what most of you have been most aware of, because of the tripling in softwood lumber prices over the last 12 months. I will tell you that at the beginning of this, I explained that I'm going to be speaking on this at the National Convention. I'm going to be speaking on it with the AGC of America's senior economist, Ken Simonson. And I can tell you that after speaking with Ken, the fact of the matter is that the volatility continues and will continue. Even though I know a lot of people have said, well, we've seen the lumber prices start to come down again, so we're starting to get out of this volatility. Wrong. All we're seeing is, if you look at it, there's a nice downward slice there already in lumber prices, and then it bounced right back up again. I'm not saying that it's going to do that, but what we're saying is it's too early to tell what it's going to do. Pricing right now in the world economy is very volatile. So what that means, and the same thing, by the way, if you think it was just lumber, take a look at what happened with steel. What we're trying to say is, no matter what the product, here I give you the gypsum numbers, no matter what the product, the price volatility is there. So what do you need to do? So, okay, I hope you're saying to yourself, why did Mark put this guy on the screen? Because frankly, all he's told us so far is everything we already know, that there's a bunch of causes to material price escalation, and material price escalation affects all of these different materials and products. They go up and down, they go up and down. So what does that get me? Okay, great. Now I know how my company is going to get ruined. You've done nothing for me so far. Well, hopefully this is where Mark is going to help you by having provided you this presentation, is risk mitigation for material price escalation. How do we take care of it? How do we either eliminate it or mitigate it? In other words, minimize your risk. And you can do that by shifting risk or sharing risk. And we're going to talk about both. But when can you do it? That's the big thing, is how do I do it? When can I do it? In what way do I do it? Well, you can do it at the time of the bid. You can do it during the procurement phase. You can do it during contract negotiations by including a material price escalation clause, which I highly recommend. It's the best time to do it. or you can look at your existing contract if it hits you afterwards. And I told you that's when you're going to be doing a lot of praying. So before the praying, let's try to take care of it by first at the time of the bid. And when we get to the time of the bid, you have to look at, did you use a cost estimate? Did you use a cost estimate in your bid, which is going to give you at least some prediction in the price volatility of those products? Now, what I will tell you is that we're in a time that's unprecedented. So the historical data that's gone into some of these cost indexes, unfortunately, isn't going to take care of what you're seeing today. That historical data just doesn't play out in what you're presently seeing from a price volatility standpoint. But I would still very much recommend you use a cost index when you're doing your estimating relating to build the BCI, the CCI, or even the Turner Cost Index you should be looking at. I do put a note in my slide here that some public owners use their own indice for bidding, and some public owners don't allow the use of any accounting for escalation. So please know that. Please know who you're bidding it for and what they allow or what they utilize. But additional processes during the pre-bid. This is where you need to be as well. You want to lock in material prices with your suppliers early and shift that risk downstream. If there's material suppliers on this webinar, I know I just ruined my chance of getting a Christmas basket from you guys. I apologize. But what I really mean is that you need to work with your suppliers. And you're going to see that I'm not naive here. I know that most suppliers are going to say, why am I going to take on them? I'm not going to lock in material prices when they're going crazy right now. Why would I do that? That'd be foolish. Well, we're going to talk about some ways that maybe there's some sharing. So I hope you have a good relationship with your suppliers. It means a lot. I know that it means a lot to the material suppliers. It should mean a lot to you as well. So hopefully you have a good relationship there, and you're going to find a way to make this work by not just shifting the risk, which this does, but if your material supplier says absolutely not, then you're going to need to share that risk, and that's what we'll get into in just a minute. Include a generous bid contingency to account for the potential escalation. The issue there is that I'm not naive. Again, construction is all I do. So I'm not naive. You put too big of a contingency in, guess what? You're probably not going to get the project, right? The one thing I'll remind you about is I've heard, this was the old adage, and I've heard it 1,000 times, and it's absolutely accurate. Sometimes the best project was the project you never got. And it's because of things like this. Okay, you put in a very small bid contingency, even though you were very concerned over the fact that this was a project that needed a lot of softwood lumber, even though you knew that it was volatile at this time, and all of a sudden that softwood lumber triples in price over the 12 months of that project. And now all of a sudden you are significantly in a hole. That's the problem. Okay, great. You got the job. You put in a small contingency. You got killed in the end. So sometimes if you put in a big bid contingency and it keeps you from getting the job, it was probably a good thing you didn't get it with a small contingency. So understand the project, understand what's in the project, understand the volatility of those items, and determine what you need for a bid contingency in a volatile world, if you're not going to do some of the other things that we're going to talk about. I'm not saying that you always need to put in a big contingency, but we're going to talk about other ways to share or shift that risk depending on the project. And you need to determine what your project, that specific project, the best way to handle the material price escalation. I'm going to give you lots of different options here. The next thing is something that you should be doing no matter what. Shorten the time duration that your bid's going to be held valid. And the reason that's for is you do not want, in today's day and age, to be putting in a bid today where the owner calls on that bid a year from now. And now all of a sudden you're stuck with it because you didn't put in an expiration date to that bid. Make sure that every bid you put in has an expiration date, and has an expiration date that is reasonable based on today's volatile material prices. And you can explain that within your bid, that it has a very short duration based on the fact that material prices are very volatile and could change your bid price if it's not accepted by this date. Discuss with the owner alternate materials. So in other words, look at what materials are in, especially the significant materials in that project. Determine where they're coming from, whether or not there's tariffs, trade agreement impacts on those materials or products. You know that if they're coming from a place that right now is warring, there's probably going to be issues. If there's a place that's been hit hard by COVID, it's probably going to have some issues. You know, if you know where those light fixtures that are called for, and there's 5,000 of these on the, within the commercial project that you're working on, and they're coming from a specific place in the world that is right now heavily hit by COVID, there's going to be material shortages and material supply chain interruptions, which is going to cause some significant material price increases. So go back to the owner and talk to them about that and discuss whether or not they can use a different light fixture so that you can be more predictable in your bid and your consistency within pricing. So that's sort of the bid time. Now you get into the procurement phase, and here what we're talking about, the easiest way to do it is to purchase the materials as early as possible, especially those that have a volatile pricing history in future, so that you can at least get those. If you made your bid based on a price of the material at X, that you can buy it as close to that timing as possible, so you're buying it at X. Obviously this works better when you are intimately involved with the owner and the designer in the plans and specs of the project, because if the plans aren't complete and reliable, you're going to have a real significant potential issue of if those plans change and you procured the volatile material before the plans have been completed. So consider those potential design changes if and when you're doing this. Remember also that if you are going to purchase the materials early and you do not have the laydown room or the facilities available to store those materials, that there's going to be a price. There's going to be a price for storage and there's going to be a price for handling. And so based on that, you need to ensure that you have worked that into the price of your bid or of the project. So the next thing to do when you're talking about procuring, trying to mitigate the risk during the procurement phase is, again, now we're going to the suppliers, and instead of just having them locked in the price during the bid phase, if you can get that, great, absolutely fantastic. But if they won't lock it in at the bid phase, when you're talking to them at the procurement phase, ask them to limit their right to an increase in price to your right to increase the price. And again, this takes you negotiating on both sides with whoever is your upstream contract party. And what I mean by that is if you're the GC, the upstream contract party is usually the owner. If you are if a subcontractor and you're dealing with the GC, and your upstream contracting party is usually the GC. So whoever that upstream partner is, depending on where you are in the chain of a construction project, you need to look at how I can negotiate this on both sides. Can I negotiate a price increase percentage with my upstream partner? And we're going to get into that. And if I can do that, if I can then say, okay, well, I'm only able to increase the price up to 10%, well, then can I go back to my supplier and work that negotiation where, okay, will you limit as Mr. Supplier, if I'm going to be buying $500,000 worth of these products, will you limit your price increase at that same 10%? So now you're insulated on both sides. Alternatively, limit the supplier's right to increase price to a fixed amount. Okay, well, you can increase the price on that widget from $1 to $1.10, but that's your cap. If you're gonna tell me that you might increase it more than that, I'm going to a different supplier. I have to. So again, those are ways during the procurement phase, and actually you can even utilize those during the bid phase to help minimize or mitigate your risk of material price escalation. However, by far, the best time to mitigate or eliminate your risk of material price escalation is during the contracting phase. I don't say that because I'm an attorney, but there's a reason why Mark asked me here today, and he didn't ask a supplier or a contractor to come and give this presentation. Same reason why AGC of America asked me to do this. It's because the contracting phase is where you can make it black and white, where you can actually feel secure in the way you have mitigated or eliminated your risk of material price escalation. You're using a material price escalation clause, or you're changing the type of contract that you're utilizing. Here's the most simplest form of mitigating or eliminating the risk of material price escalation. Don't use a lump sum or a stipulated sum contract or a GMP. Use a cost plus contract with no GMP. Obviously, if it's a cost plus contract, you guys know what a cost plus contract is. A cost plus contract is one where your upstream partner is responsible for the cost of the materials and products, with plus some sort of percentage fee that you're putting on the project for your services. So obviously I'm being very simplistic in my explanation of a cost plus contract, but that's in its most simplistic form what it is. And as a result of that, the owner is going to be responsible for the cost of the products. And so if there's a material price increase, that just goes to the owner because it's a cost plus contract. So if you can, use cost plus contracts in this. I understand, again, I'm not naive. Owners really want to know what's going to be my price for this. They want to stipulate it a lump sum contract, or at the very least a GMP. So when you're doing that, obviously you're bearing the risk of a material price increase under a stipulated sum or a lump sum contract. So you have to begin to look at material price escalation clauses. How do I make this, even though I've given them a lump sum price, a stipulated sum for this project, how do I get some help from any type of material price escalation? How do I mitigate that risk? How do I eliminate that risk? Well, there's really three clauses, really four, but we'll talk about the fourth in a way. The first one is a day one clause. These are their names. Remember them. I'm just joking. You don't have to memorize them. You just have to remember what they do. Day one clause, a threshold clause, and a delay clause. Those are the three types of material price escalation clauses. The first one is a day one escalation clause, and it's very, very simple. Day one escalation clause is exactly what it says. As of day one, when you sign the contract, any material price escalation after that is on your upstream contracting party. In other words, if you're the GC, as of day one on the project, any increase in the material prices from that day one is on the owner. You know, you get a change order for any increases in the material prices. Now, to do that, there does have to be some willingness to be open book, because what you're going to say now is you need to have an addendum drafted to your contract that just lists out, usually it's a spreadsheet, that lists out the specific materials in that project and the baseline prices for those materials that are going to be covered under the day one clause. You don't have to go down to every single potential product or material that's going to be used in that project, especially if it's going to be minimal. So what you want to do here with the day one escalation clause is list the key materials and products that are going to go into that project, and your baseline price for those products and materials that you used in coming up with your stipulated sum or lump sum in the contract. And there's always negotiations here, because owners will look at it and go, oh, wait a minute, that's way too low. You're just looking to get a change order here when you have to buy that product, and it's a lot more than that. So you're going to have some backup to where you came up with those numbers. So get ready with suppliers, proposals, et cetera, so that you have, I'm sorry, not proposals, a supplier purchase order, et cetera. So you have those numbers and you can show them. This is the numbers that I bid this project on. This is where the stipulated sum came from. If those baseline numbers go up after day one of the project, it's on the owner, and the owner has to pay you a change order for any of those prices. If when you went to buy that widget that you listed at $1, it's now $1.50, they owe you the 50 cents per widget for that price increase. So that's a day one material price escalation clause. Now, a lot of you are probably saying, oh, that's great, Ron. Now you've shown me a clause that, you know, there's no way owners are going to, or GC is going to accept the day one clause. I will tell you, I have negotiated hundreds of day one clauses, but I also will tell you that they are very difficult to negotiate. I am not, again, naive in that. So what is a much easier clause to negotiate? A threshold escalation clause. And all the threshold escalation clause, it is not, again, something that you're going to say, I have no idea what you're talking about. This is a lawyer thing. No, it's a very simple process. All the threshold escalation clause says is that over a specific threshold, you, the owner, or you, the upstream contracting party, will take on the price increase. So in other words, I will take on, as the contractor giving this bid or the stipulated sum or lump sum contract, I put down that in my list of items that a widget was $1. And if that widget goes up to $1.50, I'll take on the first 10% of it. You take on anything over that. And that's where the negotiation starts to come in, where an owner might say, or a GC may agree that there is some sharing that has to go on to mitigate the risk of a price escalation. And so what you start negotiating, what is that percentage? Is it 10%, 5%, 20%? Whatever you come up with, you will take on, you, the contractor that gave the lump sum or stipulated sum number, you will take on that percentage increase. But anything over that, the owner or your upstream party will take on. So again, using the widget example, if you put in your baseline price for widgets was $1, and that goes up to $1.20, you said 10%, you would take on the first 10%, you take on $1.10, you don't get change order for that. You just, you worked into your numbers a dollar, turned out they had to pay $1.10, you lose that 10 cents per widget. However, you didn't lose the 20 cents, you only lost 10 cents because the other 10 cents you can get a change order for, because the upstream partner agreed to take on anything above that 10% increase. So that's what a threshold escalation clause is. The next clause is a delay clause. This really has a timing aspect to it versus a percentage or a number aspect to it. And what a delay clause does is basically fixes, you agree to fix your baseline price for a certain amount of time. So in other words, we'll take that widget example again. You put in there that the widget would be $1, that you paid $1, you were estimating $1 for the purchase of that within your stipulated sum. And that widget went up to $1.20. The question is, when did it go up to $1.20? Because you were going to hold your price for the first, you agreed under a delay escalation clause, you were going to hold your price for the first 60 days. If the widget went up to $1.20 in the first 60 days, you don't get anything back from the owner. If it was still $1 after 60 days, but because of when the project ended up going forward, you purchased that widget 6 months later and it was $1.20, you get the whole 20 cents. So because of what you're doing is saying, I'm going to hold that price, that $1 that I had in the baseline price, I promise you that I'm going to hold that price for a certain amount of time. But any increase after that amount of time, you, my upstream partner, are responsible for. So it's, again, can be shifting or sharing that risk depending on how you look at it. Now, the nice thing about these is a lot of times we use both. We use an escalation clause that is a delay clause and a threshold clause. So we say, you know, I'll use the 60 days again, just as an example. It can be 3 days, it can be 6 months, doesn't matter. You negotiate that. But I'll use the 60 days for an example. If it's 60 days after the time that you entered into the contract that you're holding firm on that, after that, you can use a threshold clause, which is that you'll still take on the first 10% increase after those 60 days. So now you're using both the delay escalation clause and the threshold clause. There's one more. Remember I said there was 3, but there was really 4, and I'd get into that. Well, this is the 4th. It's really a threshold clause, but many of you, I hope, are sitting back and going, well, wait a minute. Why, if you're the owner or if you're the upstream partner, are you going to say, sure, I'll take on the risk. I'll take on the risk. Anything over 10%, I'll take that on. Why? Because I'm a nice guy. They might, and they have. I've definitely negotiated contracts in that manner. But the issue is that there's a real good chance they say no. And how to entice them is by, if you're going to ask them to take on the risk of a material price increase, to offset that, give them the benefit of a material price decrease. Now you get their interest, because what you're saying to them is, okay, we're going to take that threshold clause, the one that said, I'm responsible for the first 10% or whatever percentage you end up negotiating. It can be 2%, 5%, 10%, 20%, whatever you want. But I'm going to be responsible for the first 10% of any material price escalation, and you're going to take on the risk of anything above that. But to help you, I'm going to flip that. And if there is a decrease in the price, I will get the benefit of the first 10%, but then you'll get the benefit of anything beyond that. So even though this is a stipulated sum contract, we're going to give you the benefit of a price decrease if it goes over that same percentage of that we agreed on, whether it's 10% or whatever. So this is one that becomes much more fair, because it's not just a sharing of the risk, but it's a sharing of the benefit as well during these volatile times where you just don't know what's going to happen with material prices. So it's a very, very much a clause that gets the interest, especially of owners, when they start to think about, oh, so wait a minute, I could actually roll the dice here and get a benefit of a lower price. And this is what we have used in the consensus stocks contract. Now, consensus stocks, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the AGC used to have, the Associated General Contractors of America used to have a contract called the AGC contract documents. Those were shelved many, many years ago because lots of different reasons. And what AGC of America ended up doing was getting a lot of different groups together, and I mean subcontractor groups, surety groups, insurance groups, engineering groups, ownership groups, and coming up with a new way to look at construction contract documents. It's led by the AGC of America in their contract documents forum, and Mark is a member of the contract documents forum. I actually chair the AGC of America's contract documents forum. And don't get me wrong, neither Mark nor I get any profits from any sales or anything like that. It's just the fact that they're a very well-written document. AIA, as you guys know, I hope you know, is an advocate's document. It's written by architects, and it protects very well design professionals. Not great for contractors, as you guys probably know. I hope you do if you're contractors. But consensus stocks was written as a very fair contract. We really started from scratch and looked at how to look at each relationship, each issue that arises on a construction project, and how to make it fair, how to make it a project-centric document. And that's really what we've done with consensus stocks. It's now the second leading family of construction contracts. If you haven't looked at them, please do. Consensusstocks.org is where you can look at them. It's just better for the industry. But we have a material price escalation amendment that you can use with any contract. It's the 200.1, and it uses one of these mutual bilateral threshold clauses, where it gives it shares the risk over within a percentage, and it gives you the benefit of a price decrease over a certain percentage. So again, it's a very fair way to do it. Now, so those are how to take care of it during the bid process, the procurement phase, and the contracting phase. Now, if you have not done any of those, if you haven't taken any of my advice, that's okay. You don't have to, but it's your business. But then if you get to somewhere in the project, there's a material price escalation and it's really crushing you. What do you do? Well, what you do is you send your contract to Mark or a good construction lawyer, and you say, can you take a look at this? While he's doing that, you go get and do some of these, okay? Because it's very difficult to win a material price escalation battle if you haven't done one of the things that I have previously talked about. But here are some of the areas that you can have your attorney look at. Whether there's a change in law provision. I state here the Consensus Docs 200 actually does have a change in law provision. There are other contracts that have change in law provisions. This one specifically, Consensus Docs actually allows for additional costs or time based on an increase in taxes. So again, take a look at whether or not a change in law provision is within your construction contract and determine whether or not you can fit your material price escalation within that framework. The next thing is force majeure. Now, these force majeure became the explosive term and the explosive provision based on the pandemic that we've been battling. I can tell you that our firm literally did over 1,000 force majeure claim notices back in early 2020 when this all came out. Because of the fact that we didn't know how long projects were going to be delayed, what the costs were going to be relating to the pandemic, et cetera. So it took a lot of force majeure clauses to review and to send out the appropriate notice letters relating to those force majeure clauses. The problem with force majeure is most force majeure clauses are only written for an extension of time, not of a contract sum adjustment. And also force majeure clauses, for the most part, prior at least to the global pandemic, were read very restrictively by courts and arbitrators, only to be affected by the actual examples given in the force majeure clauses, floods, earthquakes, et cetera. And as a result of that, most force majeure clauses did not have pandemic written in them. Now they do. Now they do. But prior to that, they didn't. And so they're not a great catch-all clause to always use. It's a good place to look. And don't get me wrong, we've used it to shoehorn a lot of different things in. But it's not something that you should be relying on for your material price escalation clause for sure. Another area is mutual mistake, a really tough one to win on. And commercial impracticability, whether that material price escalation literally makes it impractical to build that project. Again, very difficult to win. All of these are arguments you can make, but are very, very difficult to win. So, you know, if you are saying, I don't need to do all those other things, I'm just going to rely on the stuff that's within the contract, not exactly what I would recommend or where I would go with it. But that's, but these are some of the clauses that your construction attorney like Mark can look into and potentially create an argument for you for making that claim, and maybe there can be some sort of settlement or resolution that at least shares the risk based on a good argument made. So really where you want to take care of it is in that bid process, the way we talked about, the procurement phase, and specifically in the contracting phase. You should be contacting Mark or your construction attorney relating to that, putting in that good construction material price escalation clause in your contract. Know that AIA, the leading contract form, does not have any type of material price escalation clause in it. Just know that, so that you know I've got to add one. When I see an AIA contract coming across my desk, the light bulb should be going off saying, I need to put a material price escalation clause into this contract. because AIA has none. I'm referring there to the Consensus Docs 200.1. It is the worst named contract ever. I did not, as much as I had a hand in creating it, I did not have a hand in naming it. Potentially, it is called the Potentially Time and Price Impacted Materials Amendment. I do not like that name, as you can tell. But it is a very balanced document. It's an excellent document. I told you it's a mutually bilateral threshold clause where you share the risk and the benefit of a price increase and a price decrease. And it also gives you that good example of the spreadsheet that has the materials listed in the baseline price, which you absolutely need. If you don't have that in there, you don't have a material price escalation clause. So with that, I will ask Neil, if there's any questions.
Let me take a look here and see if there are any. There don't seem to be any, but y'all can go ahead and ask some if you would like to.
No, absolutely. I know I covered a lot of material. I covered it quickly. I'm from Boston, so I speak quick. Sorry, guys.
Ron, this is Mark. I'm gonna hop in and just tell you how much I learned. You did not disappoint. You raised some wonderful points about every aspect of cost escalation, and I greatly appreciate that.
No, not a problem at all. I hope that I hope that your clients and those who have tuned into this have helped in some way not get stuck. I mean, material price escalation, we have seen just some horrific issues, and some contractors who have gotten themselves into a significant pickle as a result of just not having done any of these processes or put any of these provisions within their contracts, and are trying to scramble based on what we've seen is just crazy volatility in the pricing.
KJ says, great information to load me up bidding/contract process.
Well, thank you. I truly hope it did help, and it does help. And if there's any questions, I highly recommend contacting Mark. He's as good as they come, and you've gone in the right direction. And
we got one right here. John asks, or Gene asks, how would you persuade a client to add the language? We ask on every contract and still have to push back.
You'll always get pushback. I mean, nobody ever wants to take on some of the risk. We always talk about the fact that it's only fair, and if you want, the proper pricing, we can build it into our price, but that's going to, not do anybody any good. Why don't we just agree to share that risk in some way and start off with a threshold, and then if that doesn't entice them, that's when you move to a mutual bilateral threshold clause, which allows them to share in the benefit too, because frankly, in these volatile times, we have seen prices go down at times. So it's better to do that up front than versus them getting a higher price to begin with to try to cover it. That's how we discuss it usually. And never be mistaken. If you're involved at all already in reaching a contract, it's because they want you. One of the mistakes I think subcontractors always make is the fact that they just think that they're over a barrel, that they really need to do whatever the GC says. Well, the GC wants good subcontractors. GCs don't want to deal with subcontractors that are fly-by-night just because they give them a better price or will agree to stringent contract terms. They want good subcontractors so that they don't have any problems on the project, and that therefore doesn't put them in a problematic position with their client, which is the owner. So never feel what you're asking for is a fair, in this case, risk sharing. If you're asking for a fair risk sharing, never shy away from pushing that. GCs need good subs the same way, subs need good subs, and owners need good GCs.
Nathan asks, can you talk about the locking and pricing on materials by purchasing, like lumber, prior to a contract?
Sure. I mean, that's based all on your relationship with your supplier. I mean, there's no law on it. I can't tell you that you can go to this and hold them to a specific price based on unless you have signed the purchase order and the purchase order is clear that there'll be a lock in the price. I'm saying actually just negotiate that lock in price with the supplier. Normally what I would do is if you have a great relationship with one, you lean on that relationship. If you don't have a great relationship with one, go to a number and let the other suppliers know that you're dealing with the other suppliers and see if one will push based on the for a locked price based on the fact that the size of your order, et cetera. It really depends on that. If your order is a small one, doesn't really matter much to them. They're probably not going to lock the price.
Any other questions? We'll give another 2 minutes.
And by the way, on the locking of the price, make sure the locking of the price is in writing. And normally they're only going to lock it for a certain amount of time. Make sure the timing is in there so that everybody knows what the price is, that it is locked, that there will be no price increases up to a certain amount of time.
Yeah. And Ron, one of our clients did exactly that while they were negotiating a contract on a multifamily unit. They were very concerned about the lumber escalation. So the supplier was willing to lock in the prices for 8 hours. So literally they had negotiated the contract, filled in the amount, and then went and then locked in, purchased the materials, locked them in at that rate.
And that's not surprising as far as the timing goes because of it was lumber, and lumber has been the most volatile. Mm. But it's the right thing to do. Depending on what you look at as your purchase date or time, to the extent that you can get it locked in for that, you're in a much better position than not. You just don't know what's going to happen.
That's right. Well, again, I really appreciate this, Ron. I think it was great for our clients. I know it was great for me, just a great organization, and it's very helpful information. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Another question from Jean or John,
sure.
not entirely sure, asking if the presentation will be available later, and she says great info. If you want, you can email Mark or myself, some information will be on the next couple of slides, and we can send you the PowerPoint, and I think the webinar recording should be available